Thank you very much for those kind words. I want to thank Michael and his team for organizing this fine event. I have always been puzzled in the way we teach religious studies that we pay so little attention to the role of music in religion. And yet for the masses of people in all religions, it's music. The music, the chant, that is the power. So I'm currently working on a book that is trying to look at how it is that the chant, the word, the chant, and the kirtan, the singing of hymns and so on, transforms lives and people. We did a little project on this that Peshawar took part in. It was my first attempt in this direction, although I recruited Guy Beck down in New Orleans, a professional musician, to chair it. We call it Sacred Sound, and it was a chapter, sort of intro textbook chapter on how music functions in each of the religions. I don't know if any of you have heard Peshawar perform. He came and did the Sikh presentation for that project as a lecture performance. If you haven't heard Peshawar perform, you're missing a great thing, I'll tell you. So what I'm presenting here is, this is a book I'm doing all the chapters in. I like doing comparative projects like this. So this is my attempt at the Sikh chapter, and I welcome your feedback. I'm going to revise it, and before I dare send it to Peshawar for final assessment. So I would say the Sikh tradition itself, I'm going to time myself from now, okay? The Sikh tradition itself is, I think, the top religion in the world in terms of the way it engages music and uses music. So if I were starting over again, I'd probably become a Sikh scholar in this regard, for this is where the power is for me. Wilfred Cantwell Smith says, for words or a text to have transforming power, it needs to be in a living relationship with the community. And Peshawar points out that for Sikhs, the living relationship is between the book and its people. And through it, the Guru speaks to his followers with transforming power. And this transformation is effected through uttered sounds, nam, shabad, the visual emanations, the darsan, the edible benefits, the prasad, and the nectar, the amrit of the Guru. Uttered sounds in the form of recited, chanted, or sung Gurbani are especially effective for the personal transformation, since the words of the Guru are most powerful of all words that a Sikh might engage in during his or her life. This is because the community holds Sikh scripture to be the actual embodiment of the eternal Guru. Thus the name, the Guru Granth Sahib. For Gurbani to transform one's consciousness, it must be vocalized. As Peshawar puts it, singing is regarded as the earthly resonance of the divine word. Each individual Sikh tries to understand the meaning of life in the light of his or her daily experience of immersing himself or herself in Gurbani. Dusenberry says that for Sikhs, the Gurbani is the manifestation of the divine through Nanak, the historical gurus, and ultimately Guru Granth Sahib. For Sikhs, the uttered sound of divine word channeled through the Guru in worship establish the connection between the divine and the devotee and help overcome their duality or, sorry, I'm not good in, I don't know Punjab at all for pronunciation. Their duality or dividya, which Nanak declares to be the essence of human problem. In the chanting of God's name, the singing of hymns, the hearing of scriptures, Sikh devotees receive via the Gurbani substances that transform them in body as well as in spirit. In fact, says Dusenberry, being a Sikh means incorporating into one's person the divine coded substances of their Guru. Now let's see how this understanding of language, of Bach, functions in the chants and the hymns, the kirtan of Sikhs. So first section then, chanting Nam Shimran, the divine name. Nam Shimran is a daily discipline ranging from the simple repetition of an appropriate word through the devout singing of hymns of kirtan too sophisticated meditation. Peshore describes the ideal daily devotion of a devout Sikh as beginning with meditation on the divine name. This occurs between 3 and 6 in the morning, immediately after rising and bathing. This meditation is followed by a recitation of 5 liturgical prayers. These prayers are learnt in childhood and recited from memory, very important issue here, as through their life as daily devotions. The chanting of these prayers, all passages from the Guru Granth Sahib, form a daily living relationship with Scripture, not just to read it or to appropriate its meaning rationally, but to interiorize it into one's consciousness, so that it becomes a spiritual resource that automatically guides one's thought and behavior, I would say even channels perceptions, throughout the day and especially at times of personal or communal crisis. In ideal practice, one's daily devotion each morning at home is followed by congregational worship at the Gurdwara. Christina Marvold compares this ideal practice, and then of course one ideally should follow that by going to the Gurdwara and engage in congregational kirtan. Christina Marvold compares this ideal practice of daily devotion with the actual practice of Sikhs in Varanasi. She notes the special importance of the opening hymn of the scriptural corpus, the Japji Sahib. At an early age, the children learn and pronounce this Mula Mantra, in which Sikh practice is frequently used for continuous repetition, or jap, and remembrance of the divine qualities. Reciting the mantra is equal to declaration of acceptance and adherence to Sikh religion. In his autobiography, Tara Singh Bains, a Sikh immigrant to Canada, now I'm going to quote out of Hugh's other book that we didn't talk about yesterday, one of the other books, sorry, Hugh. He gives a description of his daily practice here in Canada. He says, as soon as I get out of bed, or even while I'm in bed, morning prayer begins with Shimran. This is just repeating a couple of words, Satnam Wahguru, or Wahguru or Wahguru. This Shimran continues while I do bathing. It takes 2 to 2.5 hours. Then I recite Gurbani from memory for an hour and a half. During the day, whenever possible, during eating time and so on, Simran continues at heart without enunciation. In the evening prayer takes about 30 minutes. Then my daily schedule ends at bed with another 10 minutes of kirtan, sohila, singing the bedtime prayer, mixed with some Simran. Now this Sikh discipline of reciting has the effect of keeping one's whole life focused on and immersed in the sacred word. It's a powerful form of what I would call Vak Yoga. As Tara Singh Bains puts it, prayer is the vehicle for travel on the path of spirituality to the destination that is the Almighty. The only time I understand the scatteredness of my inner individuality is when I get into prayer or recital. Then I forget about my individuality and become totally absorbed in prayer. Let's move to kirtan. In Indian philosophy, the physical vibrations of musical sound, nada, are inextricably connected with the spiritual word. Sikh doctrine maintains that the inspired utterance of the Guru, Gurbani, embodies the divine word, the Shabad or nada. In his Ramakali hymn, for instance, Guru Nanak proclaims, Gurbani embodies all scriptural knowledge and the eternal sounding melodious vibration, the nada, that permeates all space. This is a very common understanding through all Indian philosophy and religion, that vibration, the nada, is the essence of what's going on in all categories of life, really, and the universe. So also our Guru Arjan proclaims, the true aim of my life lies in the absorption of religious discourse, kirtan, and the vibrations of the divine word through singing and music. In Sikh devotion, the written words fill the same function as that, I would say, of a musical score in relation to the performed music. Just as you have a written score, it has no value until it's vocalized, until it's performed. So also the written text of the Adi Granth has spiritual power only as it's sung. This is evident in the very structure of the written text. It's poetry, and at the top of each hymn, the name of the raga and rhythm to be used in its singing are clearly stated. It's a musical score, one could say. That's why in the devotional experience of Scripture, it can't be had from translations, and just as with the learning of music, if it's learned by heart in childhood, it will never be forgotten. It will always be with you. When you're so old you can't remember what you had for breakfast, it will still be there. Once learned, the constant singing and chanting of Scripture is described by one devotee as, quote, vibrating into you, clearing and opening your mind to God's grace. Ultimately, it enables one to dwell within the house of the Guru's word. In village India, where many adult Canadian Sikhs grew up, this kind of devotional immersing oneself in Scripture happened quite naturally and without great self-effort. In this rural, traditional environment with no television, radio, or other distractions, the divine music of the Adi Granth surrounded one and was naturally absorbed into one's consciousness. But in modern life, notes Bashora, Sikhs attempt to deal with the distractions and the lack of that village context. They attempt to deal with that by surrounding themselves with devotions played on CDs or musical recordings of kirtan in their homes or while driving to work. At the Gurdwara, congregational worship consists mainly in devotional singing of sacred hymns. Through such kirtan, Sikhs attune themselves to vibrate in harmony with the divine word and thereby immerse themselves in the deeper levels of spiritual experience. Now going back to Maiwald, in her field experience in Varanasi, she describes how kirtan in devotional practice is presented in her, as she found it in her personal interviews. An elderly Sikh woman said, "Kirtan is food for my soul." One devotee defined kirtan in terms of internal feelings that arise through the language of music. The combination of music and vocal components kindle a flame for spiritual longing in the human heart and in the soul, and generate a taste, a rasa, of the Guru's words. A religious experience that's simultaneously emotional, sensual, and intuitive. Or in the words of a young female student, kirtan performances should not only touch the ears, but go into people, into their hearts. Maiwald's interviews illustrate a key principle for Sikhs, namely that the recitation of daily prayers or mantras by heart and singing of hymns of kirtan has transforming and purifying effects. As Peshawar puts it, the simple repetition of the sacred word sanctifies the whole of life in the individual in much the same way as a seed sprouts with continual watering and grows into a beautiful tree in the garden. It results in experiences that develop progressively as meditation draws the individual nearer and nearer to the divine. At the highest stage, the process becomes internalized and Nam Shimaran continues automatically, japa jap. This is where one listens to the music, the dhumi of divine word within oneself. Now my final section, looking at changes that are occurring in the diaspora in this experience of music. The crucial importance of being immersed in learning the singing of Scripture as a child poses a major challenge to Sikh parents in modernity, especially in diaspora communities. A Canadian Sikh describes the pressures to drink and eat meat and the lack of time for daily discipline of saying morning and evening prayers. He says, this was in research, I did field research here in Calgary in the early 1980s when Peshawar was still here. He says, I think we need to go back to more devotion. Living in Western context, you're torn apart by these things. So many Sikhs, even those who have taken Amrit, have betrayed the religion. I can easily opt out of so many things, except only 20% Sikhism live the other life for 80% of the time. He feels himself pulled apart by the pressures towards egoism, selfishness, and competition. And all of these tendencies go directly against the Guru Granth Sahib. In Canada, television, computers, smartphones, not the Adi Granth, is what one naturally absorbs. Special discipline is therefore essential if the lived scriptural experience of village India is to be had in the modern West. Saying morning and evening prayers is not something that happens naturally in modern life. It requires considerable self-discipline, and so Kirtan revival movements in diaspora communities, especially after 1984, have played an important role in globalizing Sikh devotional consciousness. Unless the family and the Gurdwara make a strong effort against the flow, the devotional approach to Scripture will not be given value or development in the child's experience. And if this doesn't happen, then that's partly why we lose the youth out of the communities, I would say. In this connection, a fundamental prerequisite is the teaching of the Punjabi language to children, something at the time I did my field research here was being done with vigor in both the Gurdwara and the community and the family study, and perhaps part of Peshawar had something to do with that. Now, Kirtan in the diaspora after 1984. In their excellent article, Sikh Kirtan in the Diaspora, Pirwal and Lally trace the developments of Kirtan singing in diaspora communities. They identify modernizing influences that in the globalized Sikh diaspora, resulting in a rich diversity of Kirtan practice, from religious folk and revivalist projects to a return to traditional Kirtan performance. In 1984 and after, the consciousness roused in the diaspora focused on Sikh identity through new forms of cultural and religious activism, and Kirtan singing was a key way in which the globalizing consciousness spread. The authors identify several important religious musical practices within Sikh Kirtan during this period, including the 8KJ Kirtan, the Dharmic Greek, the Satsang styles, and the revivalist projects to return to traditional forms of Kirtan. Let's look at each of these briefly to conclude. AKJ Kirtan has a distinctive style and form which emphasize Guru Mantra. Instead of traditional recitation of Kirtan, which denoted rag and tal with traditional instruments, the AKJ style is simple and repetitive so that devotees can sing along to easily accessible tunes accompanied by harmonium and tabla. The collective singing of the Guru Mantra through repetition with increasing speed and intensity builds to an ecstatic and rapturous Kirtan experience. The potent simplicity and power of Kirtan through the repetition of Vaheguru led to an awakening of Sikh consciousness for the diaspora youth from the mid-1980s to the mid-1990s. Since then, the AKJ Kirtan practice remains popular, and although not classical in form, has made a significant mark on Kirtan in the diaspora. Now, influences from world folk and world music have also stretched the boundaries of Kirtan. Pirwal and Lally give the example of Daya Singh's world music group from Australia. Not only does Daya Singh's group use the harmonium and tabla in its renditions of Shabad Kirtan, but also the Aboriginal didgeridoo, European gypsy violin, electric guitar, and other instruments in their recordings and performance, stretching the imagination and boundaries of Kirtan. The authors recount how Daya Singh's group came to a California town to run a Sikh youth camp, teaching the children Gurbani Kirtan using their world music style. And while the youth responded positively to the music and learned a great deal, the Gurdwara committee members became quite upset over Daya Singh's style of teaching in Kirtan, and in the end refused payment. But others in the community were greatly appreciative of the impact the week had on their youth, evoking interest in Sikhism and Kirtan. Also during the past decade, and that music has continued popular, I think as most of you would know, in CDs and so on globally. Also during the past decade, Sanatnam Kaur Khalsa, a California-raised member of the 3HO community, introduced a style combining Celtic Native American chants with Indian ragas, Western folk jazz, and veered away from classical Kirtan in rag and tal. I was introduced to that last Christmas when my daughter, who does yoga meditation and stuff, gave me a CD of it for Christmas. She said it would help me in my meditation. In response to such modernist evolutionary Kirtan styles, styles, the Sikh diaspora has witnessed a revivalist movement which aims to bring the singing of kirtan back to its classical roots. For example, the classical instruments have been reinstated in the Golden Temple in Amritsar, especially with all the stringed instruments. Also in the UK, the Raj Academy has developed a strong method of teaching and commitment to the practice and preservation of kirtan in a classical art form, drawing on the expertise and heritage of the Namdaris. They promote kirtan as the sacred art of singing and playing hymns from the Guru Granth Sahib in the prescribed ragas within the classical tradition and mode which moves away from the modern. The conclusion offered by Purwal and Lally in their analysis of development of kirtan in the Sikh diaspora after 1984 is as follows. The diaspora dimension of kirtan's evolution shows both a desire to connect with a global Sikh identity while also asserting a historical tradition which predates the colonial encounter. Now, I've said little about the importance of kirtan recording by records, cassettes, CDs, DVDs, and the more recent plethora of internet sites which can be downloaded for listening. This task I leave for others more skilled in music and contemporary technology. But I do want to say, and this is, I guess, my most important conclusion, in my understanding, it's not enough to listen to kirtan via TV or on a CD or DVD or internet download. It's my view that in order to have power to transform one's consciousness, the focus of my analysis, music needs to be personally performed. For kirtan, this suggests that one needs to engage in the recitation or singing oneself in one's own morning or evening devotions, and by singing kirtans with the congregation in a gurdwara, youth camp, or other group setting. As Peshora puts it, the singing of kirtan in a congregational setting is the heart of Sikh devotional experience. Through such kirtan, the devotees attune themselves to vibrate in harmony with the divine word, which has the power to transform and unify their consciousness. Thank you.